Okay, so chapter five. One of the things I want to get across to you is the Comanche appear in Northwest Texas in the early 1600s, and that's why it's important to remember the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, because that's what loosened all these horses. That's what freed all these horses from Santa Fe, and Indian groups all over this area got access to the horse, including the Comanche, and it turned out the Comanche turned to be the best at horsemanship or horse culture, I guess is really a better way to put it. So right about the time the Spanish are coming into Texas from the south, right, from San Juan Bautista, the Comanches are coming into Texas from the different direction. They're coming in from the north. Now, one point that I want to make, and I think it's worth making, is when the Spanish come into Texas, they're not exactly in the Comancheria. The Spanish really are in East Texas. And one of the things that you might note is the Comancheria, the raiding range, is just a little bit west. So, one of the ways to think about this is that San Antonio actually is right on the border of where the Comanches raided. And so San Antonio, if it had been a little bit further west, or if it had been in the Comancheria, it would have been wiped out completely. So so the Spanish are coming in about the same time as the Comanche. They're coming in from different directions, and Spanish settlements are right on the edge of the Comanche raiding region, but they're just enough to stop the Spanish from going any further north. So one of the ways about thinking about the relationship between the Spanish and the Comanche in Texas is the Comanches contain the Spanish basically in San Antonio and the areas east of San Antonio. So what you have in the 1700s, you have two empires. You have the Spanish Empire and the Comanche Empire. And this is the important point. The Comanche Empire was stronger than the Spanish Empire. It was far stronger. There were many, many times more warriors in the Comanche Empire than there were Spanish soldiers, maybe 30 or 40 times. Also, the French are often are working with the Comanche as well, which, of course, if you when you listen to my podcast, this will make sense. Which drove the Spanish crazy. French traders would actually send guns, supply guns to the Comanche and the other Norteño tribes in return for hides. Hides. It doesn't sound like deer hides, other kinds of hides. They don't sound like it's that big a deal, but actually it was $1 billion business. Hides were very, very popular in Europe for all kinds of reasons. They were very valued and they were worth a lot of money. And so the Comanches are making a lot of money, especially trading with the French in these hides. Okay, so big point. The Spanish don't subjugate the Comanche. The Comanche are stronger. And they come in to Texas about the same time. One of the points I want you to note is that when the Comanches really start getting power, they go to war against the Apache, and they're much stronger than the Apache. The Apache are driven actually into the San Antonio area. And in the 1700s, really, it was Apaches that caused the more trouble for San Antonio than the Comanche did, because San Antonio was right on the edge of the Comanche raiding range. So the Apaches had been driven into this area by the Comanches, and they were the ones that tended to raid San Antonio more than the Comanche. Because San Antonio was on the outer edge of the Comanche raiding area. So note that by the 1720s, about the time that San Antonio, Aguayo, and you'll know who Aguayo is when you listen to my podcast, about the time that Aguayo comes in and establishes a firm Spanish presence in Texas, the Comanches have also established themselves in Northwest Texas. So like I say, you have two neighboring empires that touched on each other in what today we call Texas. Okay. Now, one note that it's important for you to know, the Apaches that were in Texas were called the Lipan Apaches, Lipan, and they're called the Lipan Apaches, and that means Eastern Apaches. Other Apaches were driven into Arizona by the Comanche into this area, and they're the Mescalero Apache. You don't have to know that for the test. The Apaches that came into Texas were called the Lipan, or the Eastern Apache. And the Comanche and the Apache hated each other with a passion. Uh, okay, now one of the incidents, important incidents that Gwynne talks about is the attack on the San Saba mission, and I'll bring that okay, here's the San Saba. Here are the missions in San Antonio. Note the concentration of missions in San Antonio. Note that San Saba is north and west of San Antonio, about 120 miles or so, maybe a little bit more. And Gwynne talks about this, but basically the Apaches trick the Spanish into creating a mission in a presidio in San Saba. And the Spanish fall for this because they want to convert souls, but also they believe there's gold in the hill country. There had been rumors that there was gold in the hill country, and the Spanish were hoping to go grab that. So anyway, the Apaches, they persuade the Spanish to create a mission and a presidio in San Saba, but it's a huge mistake because this is in the actual Comancheria itself. Let me go back to the Comancheria area. So what the Spanish do foolishly is they create a mission and a presidio in the Comancheria itself. And the Comanches may not have had a written language, but they knew exactly what the borders of their empire were. And so when the Spanish come into this area, the Comanches immediately decide that this has to be destroyed, and they create an alliance with other northern Indians. The Comanche didn't fight everybody. For instance, they had alliances with the Kiowa Indians. So they created an alliance with other Indians, and they just destroyed the San Saba mission, killed some folks. And it's the key to this is that stopped any further penetration of the Spanish into Texas. So this is the way to think about it. You had two empires in what today is Texas. To the north and west, you had the Comanche Empire. To the south and east, beginning with San Antonio, east of San Antonio, you had the Spanish Empire, and the Comanche Empire is much more powerful. Now, there's an interesting discussion in Gwynne, at least I think it's interesting. The Spanish try to punish the Norteños that had destroyed San Saba, but I just want you to note how well that goes. And I'll give you a hint. It doesn't go very well. Finally, in the end of the chapter, Gwynne has a discussion of the governor of New Mexico, Anza. And Anza, he figured out a way to fight the the Comanche, and that was just to take the fight to them. So he created a huge expedition, went in and attacked the Comanche that were in New Mexico. Remember, there's numerous Comanche bands. He actually defeats them, but what he does is he makes peace with them. That was his whole goal, and he makes peace with them. And that peace lasts for almost 40 years. But what happened, the Spanish in Texas never had enough, they never had enough resources to defeat the Comanche in Texas, unlike in New Mexico. So just take a look at what Anza does without getting too fussed about whether or not you'll be quizzed on it. Now, in terms of dates, you need to know 1680, the Pueblo Revolt, because that's what allows horses to these Indian tribes to gain access to the horse, which changes their lives, which really changes history. In terms of the Comanche, that by the 1720s, about the same time that the Spanish have come into eastern part of Texas, the Comanche have established dominance in northwest Texas. So that's all you need to know there. The 1750s, That's when San Saba happens. I'm not going to ask you exactly what year that was. I think it's 17. I can't even remember myself, which is why I don't test people on dates. Anyway, 1750s is good enough. And the big picture there is that stops the Spanish from going any further north in Texas. So the Comanches stopped the Spanish in their tracks. So that's the orientation towards Gwynne. I've just got a couple of other things I want to show you. Uh, let's see here. Here is this really cool. This is in Mexico City. Let me see if I can find. I don't think I can. Okay. This is in Mexico City, and this is a huge painting of the destruction of the San Saba mission. And it was authorized. It was paid for by a cousin of the priest who was killed at San Saba, and it's kind of neat. It actually tells you a lot. It shows that the mission was just wood, so you can get a sense of how the missions looked at first. They just had wood stakes. It wasn't like the missions that you see today. Pretty rudimentary. You can see the cross there, and then you can see how outnumbered the Spanish are by the Indian groups. And then you've got the priests on either side who were sacrificed and killed. And if you go down to Mexico City, which I highly recommend when you can travel, Mexico City is awesome. It's only 90 minutes in the air. It's the same time zone. It's cheap. It's just fantastic. This says that it was 2,000 Indians destroyed San Saba. So if you go down to Mexico City, I don't know exactly where it is. I'll have to find out. You can see this big painting that was commissioned in about a decade after the destruction of the San Saba mission.